Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tips, tools, and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively. Welcome back, everyone. Today I have a special guest. I have Vanessa Broers. Vanessa is a coach, speaker, and author of the book, We Are One, a dynamic story of a woman reclaiming her identity through motherhood. Vanessa has always been driven by success. The harder she worked and the more she pushed, the more successful she became. But it came at the cost of burnout, isolation, and disenchantment with her profession. Now, Vanessa works with purpose-driven entrepreneurs to guide them into their full power and find the magic within so they can do what they came here to do. Welcome, Vanessa. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Absolutely. Likewise. Thanks.
So you and we're going to talk about creating soul-aligned businesses because that's the energy that we're in. And there's a lot of people out there who are doing this. And so we're going to be talking about how we find our magic. How do we step into our power? And so, as entrepreneurs, as we begin to shift into a more heart-centered and soul-based business, it can be really difficult to navigate, right? So we're navigating through these established belief systems around how we create money, how we create success. What does success even look like? And so, many of us have been programmed since a really young age about how we show up in the world, including myself, and how that pertains to how we create our businesses. And so I want to talk about this because many of us have been programmed to struggle, to work really hard. And we find ourselves working ourselves to death just to make a living. And I know that this is an area that you really touch on when you're working with people. And so, Vanessa, my first question is, how do we create the lives that we truly desire without force and struggle and then burning ourselves out in the long run?
A question I'm in the forever pursuit of.
And I think I am too. And I think many of us are. That's why I want us to just dialogue through this, because I know that's a pretty heavy question, really. That's a lot there.
It is. It really, really is. And I know that I'm going to be coming to this a lot. So is it okay if I lead with the distinction that I think
Absolutely.
we'll come back to?
Start where you feel guided to start. Yes.
Yeah, the distinction that I think in order to answer that question is really important to have and preface that there might not be any distinction between these two things for somebody yet, is the difference between soul and shadow.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why this is so important is because if we want to lead a soul-led business, it seems almost so simple you'd skip it, that you actually have to have and understand and know on an embodied level the difference between when you're being led from soul and when you're being led from shadow.
Whoa,
and I say it,
that is powerful. I'm feeling that.
Okay, we're launching in the right place then.
We are.
And even as I hear myself say it, I can hear how they are distinctly different. They are distinctly different. And in my book, I write that the path out of suffering, aka out of shadow into soul, is filled with quicksand, trick exits, and
like an escape room.
Back to themselves. Yeah, it's just like escape room where you're like, I'm sure this is soul, and you're like, darn it, it was shadow. And why I say that's so important to understand, and the answer to that question is because force, struggle, and burnout only come from shadow.
Oh, I feel that. I felt that in my chest. Like when you said that, I felt that.
Yeah. I'm happy to be challenged on this. I don't think you can create a life with force, struggle, and burnout if you're living from soul.
Yeah. And so if we're moving towards living from soul and we want to overcome these shadow aspects, how do we do this? Where do we even begin?
Yeah. So where do we begin? So we begin at the beginning, which is discerning both. And then the way that I like to describe living from soul is the feeling of clean. Do you know that feeling when, let's say you have either a big or small argument, or you feel some funky energy between you and another person? Essentially, that's your shadow and their shadow colliding.
Mhm.
Then you have this uncomfortable conversation where you both honestly speak from your heart, speak the truth. And afterwards, it just has that, oh, I'm so glad it was uncomfortable, but man, I'm so glad we did that. It feels clean again.
Yeah. It's like an upliftment. It's like you feel like this murkiness. Yeah, I can completely
Yes.
visualize that.
That is the same exact energetic dynamic that happens within ourselves when we shift out of decisions that come from shadow and decisions that come from soul. They feel clean. And so when we want to move from a life and business that's soul, or move toward a life and business that's soul led, the first place to start is my vision of success coming from shadow or soul?
Ooh.
Because if you are, and it's tricky, it's not so black and white, but, and actually to make it even more complex, quite often the vision actually is the same from shadow and soul, but it's kind of like the picture gets a little more distorted and the way to get there from shadow is very different. And so, but I say it's the place to start, because just like you said at the beginning, what is even our vision of success? We have all these layers of belief and conditioning to work through. I think it can be quite tricky, much more tricky than expected, to answer that question.
Yeah, and I think we've been programmed to be working through the shadow, that's part of the way that we've been taught, is to around success specifically, or there's a variety of areas in our lives, but today we're just kind of talking about that area within our businesses. But I know for me, when it's coming from a soul, I feel it. It feels fluid. It feels light. It feels like the right choice. I don't double question it. I don't sit there and doubt it. I know when it's coming from soul, it is like gliding on ice. I am just whoosh, it's right there. Shadow, I will backtrack a little bit, doubt it, get a little fearful, maybe have a little bit of questioning around it. What are your thoughts, Vanessa, about how can you discern the difference between, moving forward from soul and moving forward from shadow?
The place that I really like to start is where it's the most obvious, because the place where I think it can be the most impactful is where it's the least obvious.
Yeah. Start from there. That's probably where many
Yeah.
are at.
There's something that in shamanic work that is called the shadow pole. And I think the shadow pole is probably one of the most helpful tools that I have used and been taught by my teachers, Leanne Brooke Tyler and Jonathan Wilkinson. They run an epic, I don't know, mystical world called Waking the Wild Medicine, or Waking the Wild. And the shadow pole is, let's say you are a person who can really, really doubt your gifts. You can go into this place of real self-doubt and just, get into this, what's the point? I'm not great. And you might be a certification junkie, that kind of energetic comes from shadow. So that's one end of the shadow pole. If you spend too much time there, you're going to want to jump to the other end of the shadow pole, which might be something like, why doesn't anybody see how great I really am? I'm so much better than all these other people out there. I deserve so much more. And even if it might be true, it's coming from a place of entitlement.
An ego.
And
Yeah.
so,
Mm-hmm.
so these are the two opposite ends of the shadow pole. Now there's something completely other, which would be soul. And that might be, I'm rooted in the truth of what I do. I express my gifts, take it or leave it. If it's not for you, great. If it is, welcome on in. Mm-hmm. But it can be harder to access that third place of soul if you haven't identified, hey, you know what? These behaviors look really different, but they're actually coming from the same energetic.
Wow.
And because we can flip-flop back from one pole to the other, and it creates a sense of balance within the ego, but it's not a restorative energy that moves us forward.
Wow. So, and I've seen myself in my business do that. I know I've been like, well, fine, this isn't meant for me. I'm throwing my hands up in the air, but I want to talk about the concept of surrendering in our business as well, because there's times when I've gotten to that point where I'm on one edge or the other of the shadow pole, And I have just thrown my hands in the air and said, I don't give a crap anymore. It is what it is. And then boom, it's like within an hour, I have clients lined up, or I have this flowing into my life. And so what are your thoughts around how we utilize letting go when it comes into this? Because it's almost like in those shadow aspects, I felt like I had resistance going. It was like I was blocking things. And then the moment I said, I don't really care anymore, is when everything just kind of fell right effortlessly on my lap. And I said, okay, well, then I guess this is meant for me. So what are your thoughts around that? Because this has been kind of that push and pull within me creating my business as well. It's one minute I'm like, I feel good. I'm gliding on the ice. And then there's times when it's like, you know what? No one even cares. Do I even care? Who cares? And I just throw my hands up.
Oh, so
And then it drops in my lap. And I'm like, really?
Yes. I mean, you bring out such an important, so important. It's that place of surrender is where we aren't trying to force something to happen. And it sure as heck probably is not happening on the timeline you want it to be. And so that description of what the heck and what's it all for and being in the shadow pole, I think can really actually be a kind of unwelcome entry into surrender. So when you recognize, all right, hey, you know what? Step one, I'm not in soul, I'm in shadow. Okay, I'm on this particular shadow pole and I'm on this end of it. It's so deceptively powerful to have that awareness. Okay, I'm on this end of the shadow pole. What's the other end? Because that's the most place I'm most likely to go that is not surrender.
Yes.
And you're kind of mapping out what not to do. And what the ego likes to do when it's not in surrender is, this down here isn't working. I care so much. Let me move over here into quitting, because clearly no one gives a crap about what I do, and neither do I.
And do I even give a crap? Like, come
Yeah.
on.
And yeah, I've been there, gosh, so many times. And when we really see, okay, this is for sure not going to work, and this is for sure not going to work, one end and the other end are not going to work, it leaves you feeling choiceless. The ego, it leaves the ego feeling choiceless. That is the entry point to surrender.
Ooh, okay.
Actually. And the ego hates it. It doesn't want to feel choiceless, because then it feels like I'm powerless, I'm trapped, I'm doomed, depending on your trauma and your somatic system. That will feel a number of different ways. The power is to hold the tension of the choicelessness and not do anything with it. Feel how much you hate it. Feel the struggle. Feel, do what you got to do, but don't leave it. Most of us spend so much time trying to exit that point of tension to relieve it. But surrender is what happens when you just hang out there long enough to realize you don't know the next step.
And it's okay.
That's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's
almost like Vanessa, I'm getting a visual of, if you're caught in a riptide, most of the time people want to swim towards the shore, but really you just need to kind of swim with it, parallel to it, and you'll come out of it. And it's like, that's the analogy I'm getting in my mind, as many of us see the end point. We're looking at the shore, so we're trying to swim that direction, when really we just need to go with the flow, so to speak, and allow ourselves to move through that tension.
I just got chills. Yes. Yes. And you made me think of something. There's two other pieces to this that I think are like just a little more practical, if that would help. One of them is the shadow ego. I use those words interchangeably. Primary objective is to relieve tension. That's it. The soul wants to create something. And so one of the things that I will often say is, there's never anything to do, but there's always an action to take. Because the ego in that riptide is like, I got to get to shore. 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 And usually the ego's choice is going to actually take you, like you were saying, like out to sea
underwater,
instead of into shore. Yeah. Where there's action to take might be go paddleboarding for 6 hours. Which is kind of like the equivalent of swimming along the shore. So I just wanted to drop those two kind of, one is the recognition piece that all the ego cares about is getting out of the pain. And the action to take might have nothing to do with your business.
Absolutely. And I like how you said it, its whole concept is to release the tension, and that's the energy coming through. There's energy moving through to, shift you into a new timeline, to quantum leap you. And oftentimes we'll get stuck in that tension and we'll sit, we'll be there, but we'll be trying to figure things out in the mind. And I love how you said to just sit with it. Sit there in that tension. It feels uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good, but you will move through it. You will move through it to a point where then it's almost like, you have an airplane that's going up through the clouds. It's really cloudy, and it gets a little, turbulent. And then you get up to the level, and then you break through the clouds, and now you're in the blue sky, and it's much smoother. Oftentimes I'm seeing that shadow aspect as the clouds. You're moving through it. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of speed that needs to get you to level out before you can even get through the clouds into the sunshine.
You're a metaphor queen.
I
gotta
am.
hear you in my
I'm telling you, it comes through analogies.
I try to use them, but they never make sense. Yours are great.
But it's so funny how it comes through me. It's like, okay, picture this, visualize this.
So good. It's such a gift. It's such a gift. I love it. Yeah. One of the questions that one of the things that the people who end up working with me often tell me is they feel a lot of anxiety. How do I get rid of anxiety? First of all, just kind of playfully and provocatively, I like to pretend anxiety doesn't exist. It's not a thing. I just take anxiety and removed it from my psyche on all levels, because it's a mass accumulation of energy. And so when you said, well, we'll move through this, the question I ask is, how do you want to move through me? And it's just a little bit different when we feel that the tension of the pre-surrender thing. If the ego wants to eliminate the anxiety, make it go away, the soul says, how do you want to move through me? Is this some wounding that's being triggered, that if I feel deeply and powerfully and I cry or I scream or I go into sacred rage, that quote anxiety will go away? Is it that I need to take this really big scary action or small scary action that I'm avoiding, and if I take it, this energy will shift? So sometimes I like to say it's divinity knocking, anxiety, divinity knocking from behind, like, let me through.
I'm stuck. And I've even told people to sit down, like you would sit across from each other, just, crisscross applesauce, sit there across from each other, and anxiety is the other one. And you have a conversation with that anxiety and you say, all right, this is how you're making me feel right now. What is the best way for us to heal this relationship? How can we move through this together in a way that benefits both of us? And I've even had that conversation with my ego. It's like, okay, I feel you. You're getting amped up a little bit. Let's calm down. I see where you're coming from. I know that there's been times where this hasn't worked out, but we're in a different space now. We're going to work through this and we're going to move through it. And so I love that. It's like there's these different tools and techniques that we can use to move through that shadow pull where we are feeling the tension and the stress.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. The dialogue with self.
Yeah. And so now, Vanessa, you talk a lot about the secret ingredient in our business practices, magic. And I love magic. I talk about magic all the time on my show. I mean, we were just talking about, mystery and magic a few shows ago. It was just, it's really fun. And I think when we bring magic into our lives, it can be very powerful. So, Vanessa, why is it so important for us to bring magic into our, our purpose-driven careers, lives, love life, whatever it may be? Why is it so important to bring that in?
My humble opinion is that it's because it's why we're in it in the first place. It's the thing we want. I know we feel so often like the thing we want is that we're going to be guaranteed that we're going to be okay. And we're for sure going to be successful. And this problem will get resolved. And this relationship will last. And the money will flow. We want We want that certainty. My goodness, do we want it? But I think it's the opposite of magic. It's boring. Certainty is boring. It
No,
might
you're
be more
right.
comfortable, might be more tolerable, but it's freaking boring. And especially if you're a soul-driven entrepreneur, I mean, the people who are in your world, like we are steeped in magic and God and spirit, and
And it's so
simultaneously
fun.
like
And things just
waiting for
appear. And you're like,
control.
what? How fun is that?
Yeah. And it's so innocently, beautifully human, but it is, I believe, the opposite of what we actually want. It's not the way, gosh, there's a $1 billion industry on if you put 1 + 1 + 1 + 2 equals success, and everyone who's purchased one of those programs know it doesn't work. And they all work, but we don't want someone to tell us how the movie ends or what happens after the next turn. Not really. And to me, magic is the reason. I want to not know what's coming. I want to not know in some way where the next client is coming from, or, you know, will I really make the money? Will I really do the thing? It's the fun of it.
It's the creation of it, right? It's the choices that we make. And, and I had a friend tell me yesterday, I had a psychic give me my future prediction, and she told me I wasn't going to meet a man. And I said, well, she's just picking up on one timeline. We have infinite timelines, right? So you have a choice to shift your energy to align with that perfect, partner for you in that now moment, and so I believe that we create the magic in our lives. We create the paths, and we can shift into any timeline based off of how we feel, our frequency, our thoughts, who we're interacting with, who we're spending most of our time with. And that's the beauty of it, is we have the choice every single moment to shift. And then the magic appears. You're like, okay, every day I'm doing the same thing. Nothing's happening. I'm bored. This stinks. And then I'm going to do something different. Boom. Magically,
Yes.
money drops in front of your feet, or magically you get a phone call from someone that offers you this amazing opportunity. And you're like, wow, I changed one little thing in my daily normal routine. And now look what happened. I shifted into a new timeline.
Love that. I love that. To me, magic is also space for God.
Mhm.
It's return. I have a 4-year-old. Her name's Pepper, and she is just, every day I'm utterly awestruck by this. She's just like the tarot card, the fool, but like with fairy wings and a glittery headband. She's just everything. Of course, everything will be okay. And of course, life is beautiful. She's still really in that beautiful, tender magic space. And I think that magic has it's always been really appealing to me. At one time, it might as well have been Harry Potter. You were talking
Yeah.
about Harry Potter. I think it's useful. But to me, I thought that was the only version of what magic was, and it felt out of reach, and it felt unfair that some people could access it and I couldn't. And so it's been this sort of elusive, haunting thing for me for a long time. And more, I have come to understand magic really as two things. And one is the space for God and the willingness to trust. And second, nature.
Yes. 100% nature. As you can
And if
see.
I put,
Wow.
yes, it's so beautiful. I mean, it looks like I live in Denver, so that kind of looks like.
Yeah, this is North Idaho. All the pictures I post in my background are me on hikes. Like this is a few weeks
Yes.
ago. And so, we're talking about magic. And yesterday, actually, we went on a hike with a friend, and we were having so many magical experiences. I mean, from goosebumps to seeing things that weren't meant to be seen in our physical reality, to having interactions with others that just seemed what some people may call like a miracle. And I think when we tune in to that natural frequency, we magically open ourselves up to other realms, other dimensions, other realities, timelines, whatever you want to call them. And nature holds the key to that for us. And I know for me, when I'm feeling that burnout, isolation, overwhelm, I'm immediately, my body is like, get out into nature, put your feet in the lake, go take a hike, go smell some evergreen trees, you know, whatever you got to do, connect with nature.
I mean, it's like if that's all anybody took from this episode,
Yeah. Get outside.
That's it. I really think that nature is the frequency of soul. Nature and soul are the same frequency. And so one of my little kind of hacks, if we're living a soul-led business, you know, go work outside. But one of the things that I teach and I play with myself is there's an inside speed and there's an outside speed. How fast are you moving on the inside? How fast is your outside world moving? Now, if you go into nature, the outside world is moving at the speed of soul. Your inside might not be moving at the speed of soul. So I will go into nature and I'll sit and I'll observe my inside speed and I'll observe the outside speed and I'll notice the contrast. And then I'll sit there until my inside speed matches the outside speed. And it's a really good practice because now I can do it in 5 minutes. You know, it used to take me 5 hours if I got it all.
Yeah, because I know that. I mean, I worked in healthcare for 20 years and it would take me, I'd go on a vacation, a big vacation every year, and it would take me a week just to simmer down.
Yeah.
You know, even if I was in nature, you know, so I can completely feel where you're coming from. It's like, but once you start, you know, kind of making that a part in your life, if you're, you know, taking a walk in the morning in nature, taking a run, going and sitting on the grass and meditating, whatever it may be, I just love the sound of the birds. I feel like just hearing the birds for me and smelling. Right now, we've been getting a lot of rain. So I'm telling you, the smells right now are off the chain. It smells, I said, if I could put this in a candle, I would make a killing on this. It smells so good here right now.
I know,
and I know there's people in the world like smoke because there's a lot of smoke going on from Canada. But if I can send you some beautiful pine and evergreen scent, I'm sending it over right now, because there is something to be said about activating our senses in nature. It really does heal us.
You know, it does. And I think that the other reason for that I'm just at the very beginning stages of, I mean, understanding on an embodied level, not just a conceptual level, it is home. It's where our ancient DNA knows as home. You know, even when I say that, I want to sink my teeth into the dirt, you know, this is like, it's so primal and such a huge part of why we have become so disconnected is not just because of ego and conditioning. That's a huge part of it. The other part is the primal animal in you wants to go home, and that is nature.
Yes, it is. And you talk a lot about coming home. What do you mean by that when you're working with people, you know, bringing people back to home?
I mean 3 things. One is this recognition that you are an animal. At the end of the day, you are a highly conscious animal, but you are an animal. And, you know, if I'm a caged lion, home is not the zoo. Home is the savannah. Mm-hmm. And my DNA will be most comfortable there. You know, it may not survive, just like if we disappeared into the woods, we might not either. We're out of practice. But that's number one, the recognition that you are an animal and that you have been domesticated and you're really wild, you know, and that rewilding makes you feel home. The second is God and soul and the deepest possible sense. As you know, I used to say this thing, you know, I talk about the difference between surrendering and surrendering is a strategy.
Yeah.
And one day it hit me, surrender is the goal. It's not a strategy to get to the goal. It is the goal. To me, home is when we remember, accept, and revel in the fact that we are absolutely not in control. Mm-hmm. And it's this real reunion with spirit, with the divine, with self. It's talked about in all the ways, and you can't really give it language, but you know it when you feel it. And it's even if you don't live in that state all the time, a moment where you're in nature, or you've had the experience of feeling at one with yourself. That's home.
Oh,
The third is an acronym, which I can share if you like.
yes, definitely.
It's having what you want, opening to God, expressing yourself, and creating through magic.
Ooh, I love
That's
that. I love that. And that's some powerful advice right there. Yeah. Ooh,
yeah.
I love magic. We are magic, we are. I think there's a natural pull for us to want to be supernatural, but we are supernatural. That's our natural organic existence. And we're playing in this earth realm, we're here to play and to create and to learn and to master things like surrender. And, we're just having a fun time, but we make it so complicated and so convoluted. And it's just, believe me, I struggled with this for years. I mean, I grew up in that environment. You've got to work, 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 work. And when I tried to shut that off, when I finally stepped out of that mindset, my body restricted itself. It was like, what are you doing? This doesn't feel normal, because I had created that as normal for me. And so it took me a year or two actually to get to a point where now my central nervous system is like nature, it's in alignment. It feels relaxed. And so, in your experience, Vanessa, I know you said you worked a lot. You worked towards success, and you worked and you pushed and pushed and pushed. And so, even though we get to a point where we say, oh, we're successful, we have a booming business, we have a great family life, we have all the things we want, but then there's times when we still don't feel like it's enough. How do we overcome that? Because I know I've been there. I know I've been to that point where it's like, okay, I've accomplished this goal, but now I don't feel like it's satiating me, or, I just don't feel, I still feel thirsty for more.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I love I love hearing you talk about, we are supernatural. I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah, we are.
We
We're
love
a Marvel
we are
movie. I said we've been
Yeah.
in Stepford Wives for a long time. No, I'm in a Marvel movie now. Like
Oh my
I'm the
God.
Eternals. Like, no, that's not my
That is-
reality anymore. I'm
Can I
not in the
ask
Truman Show anymore. Sorry. Bye-bye.
oh, it's so good. If you were a Marvel character, which one would you be?
I'm
Just to
the
take a
one, I
tiny
don't even know her name. It was on the most recent one, and she's the fire. She's the one that raises up and starts lighting up the
oh
fire and flies around in the fire. I don't even know her name, but I watched that movie and I had goosebumps all over me.
oh cool. Yeah, great answer. Great answer. I think I would pick Doctor Strange.
I love Doctor Strange. I love how he just circles his hand and
Yeah.
a portal opens. Come on.
And he's kind of arrogant and gets smashed down by the eternal source all the time. And I feel like that's me. So
I think that's all of us.
I
I feel like.
got this, God, move over. But to
Well,
answer
it's
your
like
question,
it's the Phoenix. It was the Phoenix one, the one with the Phoenix. Like she burned herself and then she came back even more powerful. It's like you've got to. It's like you got to tear yourself down to build yourself back up again.
Phoenix energy has been hot and fire in my life this year. So I love that as an answer. Yeah. So why don't we feel satiated when we have reached success? I think, can I give you 3 answers to this?
Yes.
The first is for most, I don't want to say that. Yeah. I think for most people, even really intentional, soulful, soul-led, purpose-driven people, we either create a vision from our shadow and wounding that looks kind of spiritual, or we have this really inspired vision, but then our wounding kind of takes the spiritual tools that we learn and uses it for its own agenda. Mm-hmm. So even when we reach the quote unquote vision, we've done it in a way to satisfy in Zen Buddhism what they call the hungry ghosts, the desire for significance and control and money. which the things in and of themselves aren't bad. Wealth and significance and power are wonderful. But when the ego takes the tools to get to success and does it for greed and relevance and control, even if you have the vision that looks like what it was supposed to look like, it doesn't feel the way it was supposed to feel.
Because it's not centered in the heart.
That's right. So that's the first reason. The second is, and the second and third sort of go together. And this is an exploration that's actually fairly new to me. So I'm not going to speak from a place of, I really want to be clear that I'm not anywhere close to figuring this out. Is I think because of our Western culture and even the sort of conditioning and programming within the spiritual community, so much of it is centered around the self and getting yourself ahead and breaking through your limiting beliefs for your success and your wealth and your abundance. And none of that is inherently wrong, but it's incomplete, because at the end of the day, it doesn't factor in our aching longing and desire to be a part of a whole. And so even if you actually get all the way to the top in a really soulful way and create the money and the success and the business and the space and whatever, but you're not actually a part of a bigger organism, I think it's going to feel dissatisfying.
Yeah.
Because we need to be a part of something bigger than ourselves, not just contributing to something bigger than ourselves. Being an insignificant part of the organism, I think, is a need.
Yeah, it's like it's like a chain, right? It's like you can be one link, which could be sort of effective, but if you've got a whole bunch of links together, then you're going to be way more effective. And it's going to be easier. It's going to be easier to do things when you have that camaraderie, that collaboration, that community.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I think the biggest lie that I have come to face myself, but also with so many of my clients, I would say that the biggest lie in all of entrepreneurship, is a big statement, but I'm going to go with it, is that isolation works at all. And so many entrepreneurs, even soul-led ones, even fulfilled ones, even purpose-driven ones, even aligned ones, are spending so much time by themselves in their home virtual office. And first of all, it just makes success harder, because relationships are really how you grow, but it's also where we're headed. And so isolation will almost always feel dissatisfying, no matter how much money it brings in.
No, you're right. And I think there should be that balance between connection and then alone time, and I think what many of us are learning that. I mean, I was probably 100% connection, when I was working in healthcare. Then I went 100% isolation, and now I'm beginning to balance myself out again, because it was like, I think it's part of the deprogramming too. You're like, okay, I've got all of this other belief systems that I don't know are mine. I've got to separate myself to figure out what I even believe anymore. Now I feel comfortable in my beliefs. I feel comfortable in my power. I can step back into the world again and know that I'm holding a frequency that maybe before I was a kite in a hurricane, just blowing around, all the time, where now I feel much more grounded and more stable in who I am. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to shift as you continually, work with others. I say belief systems are BS. Every single time I do a show, my belief systems are shifting, because I'm expanding my consciousness by connecting with other people. And so I think a lot of us are learning how to reintroduce ourselves back into community again, but community looks different than it did before we isolated. At least that's been my experience.
It does. It does. And I think it's something that I personally believe the collective is navigating. My kind of intuitive sense is that COVID and the lockdowns were sort of a part of, excuse me, our collective awakening around the importance of community. And so, of course, as shadow extremes, we need to be driven into the full shadow extreme of isolation, in a really intense way, to crack open something as a reminder that this whole thing has been left out of the me, and my success culture.
Yeah. And so, you also talk about there's a relationship between our external strategy and our internal transformation. And I felt this, and I think that this kind of ties into this, being with community and then isolating. And I think many of us are doing this. We're having a hard time balancing this out at times. And so what information can you share with us about this particular topic, and how can we harmonize this within ourselves, especially us who are out there feeling guided to start these soul aligned businesses?
I will begin by saying it's tricky. And part of what makes it a little bit, I think, we had talked about before that you can sort of ping pong into all inner work, all outer work, all strategy, all being, all healing, all doing, you go back and forth. And the truth is that they are just two sides of the same coin. To me, they're so inextricably linked that actually the more I spend, the less I can see the difference between them, which is actually almost unanswers the question, right? There's a purpose for both. It's unlikely that you're going to create much in the world if you don't take doing centered action, right? You have to do something to make something. On the other hand, I also believe that just breathing from a place of soul alignment is an act of co-creation.
Yes.
And so they're inextricably linked in that the way that I like to play with it is to put a different lens on your doing and a different lens on your healing. And so what I mean is, if I'm looking at my world and I'm looking at my business and I'm looking at my actions that I need to take, what kind of internal response is that activating in me? That points to whether there's inner work to do in relationship to that or not. So the outer world is really just reflecting the inner work available for you to do. My teacher calls it material for liberation.
Oh, nice.
Happened, and it triggered this thing. And actually, just on Wednesday, I just said, and oh, by the way, which is a very dangerous thing to say to a spiritual teacher. Oh, by the way, this little thing. And it was this little trigger that happened in my business. I'm in my gym right now. I also own a gym, and we had a person from the outside come in, and it was this little like agitated kind of like, I'm going to pummel you to the floor just a little bit. It's a boxing gym energy. And we looked at it, and it cracked open this agonizing, excruciatingly deep wound of unworthiness from my relationship to my father.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I didn't do that work so that I could then show up better to my business. And I think that that's where it can get really tricky, because if I'm having that relationship, well, I'm going to do that work on unworthiness around my dad so I can show up better in my business. It's very transactional. This is surrender as a strategy.
Yes.
The flip side of that is, well, I can't take any action in my business until I do that deep work on my dad. So those are sort of the two ends of that shadow pole. If we look at just the relationship between inner and outer work, there's always inner work to do. There's always outer action to take. They're inextricably linked, but they don't have to be codependent.
Yes.
You can choose that work later. Now, if you're so flatlined and you're so paralyzed and you're so stuck, you got some trauma to work on to be able to move forward.
Yeah. It's like there's something deep within there there's a blockage. If it's not flowing properly, there's some sort of a blockage there. And that's powerful, because not everyone would think, oh, my business is struggling, or I'm having a tough time in this area of my business because of something that I haven't healed on a family level or a personal level. And it's funny how that once you figure it out, it's like, boom, here we go. And I noticed that I'll be sleeping, and then I'll start to wake up and be in a theta state. And I recognize that the dream that I was having was something that is applying to my wake life. And then I'm like, okay, what did that mean? And then I'll kind of string it together and then realize, all right, I need to focus on healing that aspect. So oftentimes those things will come to us. Like you said, you're in your gym and you could be boxing or doing something, and then you have this massive trigger come up, or this massive release. And, I'll do it. I wake up and I've been sleeping, and I wake up, I have this dream, and it creates some sort of emotion inside of me. And I realize, I'm being guided to clear this, because before I went to bed, I asked, what do I need to clear? And then it presented itself to me.
I love that you use the words I'm being guided to, because I think that actually I've never kind of seen it this way, but it was so cool. Your outer action can be guiding you toward the inner work that's available to do. And I use those intentionally because it's so easy, especially in the business and culture of personal development, to be like, well, I have a block, so I can't move forward because I'm blocked. It's like, no, there's work available for you to do there, in your business and your actions, the outer stuff are guiding you to do it. The more you do the inner work, the more clearly and seamlessly are guided to the outer actions to take.
Yes.
I think that's the relationship
yeah.
between them.
And that's just that cohesion there, and you've got to be semi-consciously aware of that, because if you're not even seeing that or how those may sync up, then you might be overlooking it. And then that's what comes in when I call it the universal bitch slap. Then you're like, bam, it comes in, and then something very massive throws you, over here, and you're like, whoa, why didn't I see that? Well, you were subtly being guided, and then you got to a point where the energy had, like a pressure cooker, had built up so much that it needed to be released. And then that's when, something drastic can take place. And then you're questioning, how did I get here? Why did I get here? And so I've learned in those little nudges, those little subtle, it's like, I'd rather take the subtle nudge than the cosmic bitch slap, because that's just, who wants to go through that? Ain't nobody got time for that.
You talk to hypothetically, not me, definitely not me, but those unfortunate folks who are really clinging to control, they like the cosmic slap. I've heard.
Yeah. And that was me before. I mean, when I, was really latching on to things, and I got to a point where it's like, no, that's just not serving me anymore. And it's making it so much harder on, creating things in my life by trying to hold on to things. And I'll do that in my business. It's like, okay, I'm going to dabble over here a little bit. All right, I'm gonna let that go for a little bit. Now I'm being creatively inspired to dabble over here a little bit. And so there was a time when I was like, I got to finish this task. I got to do this. I can't move on. I can't do that. And I was realizing I was breaking up the flow of things. It was like, kind of like building blocks, like you talked about. And so just being able to feel into that intuitive nudge, that each piece of the puzzle that you're creating within your business is all going to come together, the way it's meant to, but it may not look like the way you would put the puzzle together, right?
Can I add a piece to that I think is so important? I feel like an overwhelming sense of passion about this at the moment. You don't have to grow your business fast. It doesn't mean that you are not powerful or intelligent or good at what you do. There's this kind of, I don't know how much it is a part of your world, but I was way more in the performance coaching than the spiritual aspect for so long. And it was this really kind of toxic 6 figures in 1 year. And like,
Goal
and so when
setting.
when you're just allowing things to unfold at the pace that's correct, because we can slow it down too. You don't have to grow your income every year, and you don't have to bring your business to life overnight. And sometimes living a soul-led business means letting go and moving backwards.
Or what appears to be moving backwards.
Yeah. Thanks. Good catch.
Moving backwards.
Yeah.
When really we could be expanding.
That's right. I'm teaching a class at the end of the month called Sacred Sales, Alchemizing Fear into Flow. And one of the things that occurred to me that I really wanted to share about sacred sales is that although it makes you incredibly effective at selling better, sacred sales is not always about charging and earning more. And I think it's an interesting energy to hold as, we're navigating this inner work and outer work. If we can break the relationship between, let me do inner work so I can have better outer results, it creates a lot of peace.
It really does. And it opens you up to different flows. I had a guest on the other day, and she talked about how she wrote a love note to money. And it was powerful. And I thought, I'm going to do this. Like, this is really, really cool. And so money, the way money, it was about automatic writing was the show. And she said the way money talked back to her was like, you have, you know, as humans, you have a belief that money can only come in certain, you know, paths. Money can just show up magically. Money can appear in you know, infinite amounts of ways. And so I think we get caught up in that we have to, you know, take a lot of action in order to receive. But you also talked about, which I think is important, is we do have to take some sort of action. I think, you know, there's many of us that get caught up in, you know, and I was caught up in that, where I can just sit there and meditate and pray and it's going to show up in my lap. Well, I realized that it's not as fulfilling when that happens. It's fun, you know, a few times, but it's fulfilling to take a little bit of action, and that effortless action, really inspired action, and then have it appear in that way. Because I do feel we're here in the physical reality, so we have to do something physical. And, you know, for us to just kind of wish it, you know, wish it into existence or energetically appear, we can do that, but yet that also takes away from us being the physical beings that we are, and why we're actually here on the planet to experience, you know, the whole multi-dimensional aspects of our creator beings, right?
And I often find that I want to just be able to lay here and let God is often actually a really spiritually evolved form of shadow. It's a way that we're avoiding the tension, the fear, the discomfort of something.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Not always, of course, but in the moments where, you know, it's incorrect and action is the correct thing. And that's why it's so tricky. I just went through a phase where the actual correct action for me to take was nothing but hiking and paddleboarding for like 6 weeks. It was unbearably excruciating. You know, you live in Colorado, boo-hoo. I'm like, but it's not like I had this massive chunk of money sitting there just like pumping and flowing in. I mean, I essentially brought down my whole business this year out of soul alignment.
Mm-hmm.
Not a backup plan, not a strategy, not knowing why, not having this
Just
income
trusting.
pile waiting for me. You know, we just bought this gym and we blew our savings, and now I'm sorry, do what now?
Yeah.
Go hiking? Sit in what? You know, that was bigger and bolder and scarier than half the crap I did to build my business in the first half.
Well, and you wonder
then,
if you were being connected with the water element, the flow. There was something that was, you know, you were being taught, almost like, I think, Karate Kid, when he makes him, you know, clean the cars and all this, wax on, wax off. Well, then he realizes that that's actually a move, and that's a part of his training process.
Another epic metaphor. Thank you.
The sports, you know, metaphor.
So good. But, you know, after about 6 weeks, I started to feel, this is not correct anymore. Now, I didn't know what to do. I just knew nothing wasn't correct. And that was devastatingly uncomfortable, because I'm like, well, you've got to give me something. And that is surrender. I don't know what to do. It's not nothing. I still don't know. I still don't know. I still don't know. I spent about another week in that place. And then the only thing that occurred to me to do was to come work out in the gym that I co-own with my husband that I haven't been a part of. So I was coming and I was working out every day. And then I was anxious and tense the rest of the day because I had no idea what else to do with myself. And then little by little, I was here more and I started to notice things. And now I'm a deeply integrated in this business, and it's birthing something totally new. But that was almost 8 weeks of excruciating not knowing and not acting to relieve the tension.
Yeah, because it's like we've been programmed to have to do something towards the business to make it grow, for it to grow, when in reality, when you actually relax and let go of resistance, that's when the creative inspiration will flow to you. And I've had those situations too. It's like, I've been writing a book for years now, and I'll get good flow, and then I'll back off for several months, and then I'll get another idea and start flowing and back off. I'm like, this book is taking forever. But a lot of it is because it's a different energy. Every time I bounce in to write into that book, there's a different energy. And I know the reader is going to be able to feel, you know, those shifts and that growth within me. But it's like, you know, my my third dimensional mindset is like, I want to hammer out this book and get it out on the market, I mean, but my multi-dimensional aspect is like, time doesn't exist. You're writing it based off of your soul, and this is how it's coming out energetically, and so it's funny because it sounds like, you were just being guided to just relax and release the resistance and surrender. But in the meantime, you're like, what is going on? Why am I being guided to do this?
Yeah. And I think that this is a pretty advanced, I think. But if we talk about living a soul-led life and a soul-led business, it's one of the most important things that I practice. And it's taken years, not only years, but tons of healing of my own inner child and my own shadow integration. And so this is not something to expect to just jump out and do, is to ask the question, what's the correct flow of energy? What's the correct timing? And sometimes the correct flow of energy goes nowhere. And so you sit until that feels incorrect. Okay, now this is incorrect. And I just really have always loved the words correct and incorrect, because to me, they feel so impartial. It's just mechanics. It's just quantum physics. This has nothing to do with you and your desires and your wounding or whatever. This is just where the energy wants to go. And so I'm working with a client right now, and she had the desire to lead a more soul-led business. And for so many people that work with me, that usually means almost completely bringing down the one they're in for a minute. Very scary.
I had another business, and my domain just expired 2 weeks ago, and I had to shift into this with my pod. Yeah, I think it's like, I 100% agree with that.
Yep. It's part of the initiation. I think I really do. And so she's in this phase where she's kind of wrapping up some stuff about the other business that she sold, and simultaneously just being flooded with this new energy and inspiration on the other one. And it's creating a clash. And so I said, if you just sit for 20 seconds and you just feel these two competing energies, which one would be more correct to start with? This one. Okay, great. Then what's more correct? Is it 2 months just on this business and then wrap it up and move on? Or is it 2 days a week on this business and 3 days a week on this one? She's like, oh yeah, it's the second one. And so when we feel less compelled by the energy that's, coming in hot and heavy and all over the place, we can sort of sit and energetically triage. It's like, okay, you go there, you come first, you sit down and wait your turn,
Yes, I love that. I love that analogy, and it's almost like, I think too, when you're shifting from you're closing out a business and moving into another one, you're shifting timelines, you're shifting frequencies. So it's like you're straddling for a little bit. And it's like this, almost like a tug of war energetically within inside of you. And at some point you just have to surrender and say, I honor that business and all that it taught me, and I'm ready to level up to a new timeline where now I can bring more to the table, based off of what I learned from that business. And I love that you brought that up, that almost times we have to crumble the first one in order to move on to the next one. And that's exactly what, but yeah, I look back at that Tanya, that business, I'm a different person now, I'm in a different frequency now. So that wasn't resonating anymore. And it can be hard to let that go for some people. It's like your baby, right? Your first one.
It is. And I feel actually the same way about babies as I do about businesses. They're not coming into your space for you to build them. Your baby didn't come here for you to raise it. Your baby came here for you to heal you. Your business showing up for you to become something different, not for you to grow something in the world. That's how I view entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is here to show me the places that I need to evolve, same as my daughter. Mm-hmm. And so because I view it from that perspective, when I built a multi-six-figure coaching practice that I'm then guided to, sorry, what now? Level? Okay. I don't want to do that on any fucking level. Excuse my language. I hear you. But because I so am devoted to entrepreneurship, showing me who I'm supposed to become, not necessarily just what I'm meant to create. Mm-hmm. There's, a millimeter, enough more willingness to do it.
Yeah. And there's growth in there. Whether you see it or not in the moment, you'll look back and say, wow, it's funny because I shut down my old business and I shut down my old YouTube channel, but I've been looking back at some of my videos. I'm like, whoa, have I grown since I did
Yeah, how
those
cool.
videos? So it's almost like a journal that I can sort of go back and watch and see, how far I've come. And so you don't always see it in that now moment. Sometimes you'll see it in retrospect, and then you can really honor it and appreciate how far you've come. And it's not always obvious though when you're right there smack dab in like the murky water.
Not always. I'm like, I can't think of a time ever. But yes, another definition of surrender. Just lay back in the murky water and eventually the dust will settle.
The murky water just encompass you.
Yes, just get murky.
That's fine. Well, Vanessa, this show has been so fun. We've touched on so many different topics, and I'd love for you to share, with the listeners, the audience, what services do you provide and how can people contact you?
So at the moment, I'm not doing one-to-one work right now. I'm doing a sacred sales training. That's going to be on I don't know when this will be launched, but it'll be on the 28th of this month. So of June, 2023. And that will be available after the fact as well. I'm really serving my gym right now and working inside of cultures of organizations. So I also refer to myself as a culture shaman, where I'll come in and help create cultures that put the human back in human performance. And so bring deeper levels of intimacy and joy, honestly, to really actually also increase performance. So if you have an organization, you want to reach out for that reason. Otherwise, you can go to thepowergift.com. And I have one of my most favorite free trainings that you can download there and get on my newsletter for when I do more virtual stuff in the future.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm kind of feeling guided to do courses as well. I think we can maybe even talk about this a little bit, how many of us are first guided to do one-on-ones, but then as time goes on, we feel, I know for me, I feel like I'm not reaching enough, or I'm not able to get, to expand. And so there's ways that I've been sort of being nudged towards more courses where people can, on their own schedule and on my own schedule, things are already available versus having to feel locked in to a time, into the linear time that we have here and that one-on-one. But with that said, it's like, we talked about the connection in the community. So it's almost like you're trying to, jigsaw all of this together. It's like, I know I like the one-on-ones because of that connection, but I also love the idea of doing courses on my time where I can, create things without having to keep reiterating things on a one-on-one basis, to people. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it makes so much sense that we're guided to one-on-one first, where we have the space to not only really hone in on your craft and your skill and your mastery, but one-on-one is a pretty ferocious mirror for your own, okay, got to do some healing work there, highly triggered by that, feeling all these kinds of things, and heal these like tight bounds of codependency. But I think that as you do both, your energy expands, your capacity grows. It only makes sense that the next step would be offering this wisdom, that your cup overflows in a sense. And so, yeah, it's that's where I would come back to just the soul-led divine timing of things.
Yeah.
I wanted to do courses for years, and I never did them. And then, I stepped away from my one-to-one business and into my brick and mortar business, which was also just wild. And all of a sudden I had this surge of energy and capacity and clarity that I had never had before.
Yeah. And it's like, when I'm working with people, oftentimes, they want to heal a certain aspect, but I have to go over here, deal with, we have to go over here and heal this aspect. And then we're over here and healing this. And now we're over here. Now we're back to where where they really wanted to hone in on. So it's like, I feel like wherever the energy, it moves you, and you're like, okay, I've got to go dabble in this area for a little bit. And, right now it's just, I've been really learning how to work on my website, creating more technical aspects of things. And I'm having fun, with that, where there was a time when it was just much more speaking, and those types of things, like through podcasting and whatnot. So I do see, with many, because I work with people who are starting businesses too, just like you are, or they've had established businesses, but they're looking for a change. And you get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm going to work on this and put my energy towards this for a little bit, but then you may be guided to go back to something else, but you're at a different, you're at a different mindset, when you come back and take a look at it. And at least that's been my experience. And so I don't really get caught up on that as much anymore about, I've got to just nail all of this and get it out there and, whatever. It's just more going with the flow. And then I notice when I go with the flow with it, it's fun. And then time flies by and I'm like, that just was so simple. And boom, there it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. The difference between, I call that the difference between expression and agenda. It's like, oh, it's just an expression. This is what makes the most sense based on, this is the joke I tell because this is the expression of my sense of humor. It's, oh, this is the course I create. This is expression of my voice in my business versus I got to create a course because that's what everybody does and I got to be relevant. And
which is that performance driven lifestyle,
Yeah.
And I think many of us, shift out of that. I grew up playing sports my whole life. And so I had that performance driven mindset, and to move into a more heart-centered, soul-centered, was hard for me because it was giving up a lot of control, and that, it's just that moving into surrender. And I think that's what this show, ultimately, I think that the thread is surrender, which is not easy.
If you want to tune into the cosmic irony of life, look a little bit back into my history and you will see how totally insane it is that I'm teaching surrender. I'm the most controlling human on the planet.
Sometimes it's like the thing you're like, man, that I am not good at that, but that's the thing. I think mine's control, letting go of control, surrender. I feel the same way. It's like, because I was the opposite of that. I was so structured and obsessive compulsive about things, and so programmed and routine and strict. And now it's like, we'll get there. Go with the flow. People look at me like, who are you?
We can do it. Anyone can do it.
I know. Well, Vanessa, this has been such a fun dialogue. I appreciate you so much for coming on the show and sharing your candor. I love it. I love the energy that you brought to the show, and all the things that you're doing in the world. And wherever we flow, and I think if anybody gets any little bit of advice, from the show, one little snippet is get outside in nature and surrender as much as you possibly can. And then you will naturally
go back out of nature.
Exactly. Maybe go paddleboard for 2 months. I don't know, but but thanks, Vanessa. I appreciate you.
Likewise, so much.
You deserve to navigate your life in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT tapping, and the Emotion Code, visit my website at www.theexistentialempath.com.